But how quickly he's adapted to the game, it's not that he's adapted to the first team, it's that he's been playing the same way for years, right? Some say, no, you shouldn't compete during the developmental stage. I've always thought that, well, you have to compete.
I imagine there's also internal competition too, where the players, once you're there, a family is formed, but everyone is also competing for the same goal, which is ultimately reaching the first team.
Results are important, but I repeat, they're a consequence of having done the developmental work well, right? But one thing is playing with the ball, being skillful, having a lot of skill with the ball, doing fantastic, wonderful things, right? And the other is playing football. The other is understanding football.
Jordi, today I want to talk about something that might interest a lot of people, something that connects everything we've been saying throughout all these episodes. I want to know what really sets La Masia apart from the rest, because people think it's the talent or the facilities or the coaches, but it's not like that. There's something truly distinct that separates these players from the rest. And since you've lived it from the inside for so many years, we want to know your point of view, and we're going to talk a bit about this.
Well, it's a complex and long topic, right? It's true, I've had the fortune of seeing the whole process, you know? I've been at La Masia for practically 7 or 8 years. My entire training process took place there. Then I was a coach for all the youth teams up to the professional levels. In other words, I've seen the whole cycle up close, right? So what is it that stands out? What is the distinguishing factor of La Masia? And I think it's complex, it's difficult. There isn't just one, there isn't a single reason. You mentioned before that it's not just the talent, that it's not just the facilities, that it's not just the fact of the physical building itself of La Masia. There are many circumstances, right? I think the first thing to do is to separate a bit what is the strictly footballing aspect, which has some special characteristics that we'll talk about later, and that I think make a bit of a difference. And then there's also, and I think it's very important at La Masia, also the educational aspect, right? Human, right? The human aspect, the fact of transmitting certain values, a certain way of being, a certain way of acting, betting heavily on academic training, for example, for the players who are at La Masia, which seems to me a topic very important both for the player and for the whole environment, for the peace of mind of the families. It seems to me to be an essential topic. So La Masia, among many other things, which later, surely, if you want, we'll go into detail, but I think it's very important. And as a very distinguishing factor, there's the footballing aspect, which has connotations, has elements that I think make them different from the rest, or that at least are distinguishing, or that we are recognizable in this sense, but also from an educational point of view, from a human point of view, of treating the player, of training, of transmitting a certain way of behaving, a certain way of understanding this, also makes them distinct, right? So these two aspects, I think, that are a bit of the philosophy of La Masia, and that mark a bit of the difference in relation to, well, to other types of clubs or to other types of academies, right?
Sure, I want to understand why or how La Masia produces players who seem to understand the game in a different way than everyone else. I want to understand this.
Well, we've said many times that for me, what is essential, and I think what is tried to be transmitted in a generic way, later we'll go into detail, generic to the players, is that they understand the game, right? From a footballing point of view, right? And there are many things that help with this. First, throughout all the different stages of youth development, we work on practically the same things, even at the professional level. The first team, the idea, the style of play, the training methodology is practically very similar. obviously, as it must be, adapting the workloads to the ages and so on and so forth, right? That clearly, I'm not talking about physical or tactical issues here. I'm talking about football intelligence, about understanding the game, every level, all the developmental stages from the youngest kids to the teenagers work with the same footballing philosophy. This ensures the player is very clear on how they play and what the club is looking for. Basically, I repeat, it's about understanding the game. And that allows these players, when they reach the first team, to arrive and play with a certain naturalness. People are sometimes surprised, like, wow, how quickly he's adapted to the game. The thing is, he hasn't just adapted to the first team, he's been playing the same way for years.
Of course.
And that's a very important advantage from a footballing perspective. Then, if we go back to the human side, the developmental side, well, everyone is who they are, everyone has their own character, and sometimes that's uncontrollable. But we try to instill effort, sacrifice, hard work, proper behavior, humility, and trying to compete, obviously, but with the idea that not anything goes. You have to try. And then, as always, there will be players, there will be moments where people say, hey, this guy made a mistake. Of course, I'd say that's to be expected. And mistakes are made, of course, but we try to resolve them and prevent them by instilling exactly that. How to behave, how to act, how to speak to the media. There are many things.
Right.
So those are the two main pillars that, again, we can get into more detail later if you want, but I think they're what make the kids at La Masia recognizable.
Sure. And you've mentioned competing. Do you think that compared to other clubs, other places, academies, do you think the competitive mentality is much more evident at La Masia from a very young age when they're taught this mindset or not?
This is a topic that we could also talk about for 6 months. There are many people who say, no, you shouldn't compete during the developmental stage, or that I've always thought that you have to compete. Obviously, in the developmental stage, the most important thing isn't the results. The most important thing isn't winning. Obviously, it's about developing and acquiring a series of habits that we can talk about later if you want, which are what make the difference. That understanding of the game I mentioned before, or that mental speed we've talked about many times. But I believe you have to develop while competing. It's something intrinsic to the game and to football itself. Competing in any way? No. But the player at these levels, when you're at a big club, not just here, in any big club, players have to get used to competing, to winning.
Sure.
So you also have to convey that need to compete, always from a developmental point of view. But I think you can't totally separate competing from the developmental side, right? In the same way that it's absolutely incomprehensible when in youth football there are certain clubs, certain people, certain coaches or whatever who prioritize competing. It's a mistake. In the developmental stage, the priority isn't winning or competing. It can't be separated, but it shouldn't be the absolute priority, right? Therefore, finding the balance between development and competing, I think...
Sure, that's where the balance is.
That's really the key to all of this. And I think that at La Masia, this is achieved. It's achieved very well indeed.
Sure. And well, I imagine there's also internal competition too, that the players, once you're there, there's family too, a good family forms, but everyone is also competing for the same goal, which is ultimately reaching the first team. I mean, it's also a competition and a pressure that I think is constant.
Yes. Yes, you've brought up another topic that we could also talk about for ages, right? The fact of the internal competition among the players. It can be ignored. When people join, we're talking about La Masia now, but in any academy of any big team, there's a huge competition. There's enormous competitiveness between them because in the end, we all know, and I'm speaking because I was there, I repeat, 7 or 8 years, and every year, you're exposed to seeing how you evolve. You have to keep evolving, you have to keep improving, but you also know the club, because it's their job, has to be constantly open to bringing in new players. If there's actually more talent outside and players who adapt better, who read the game better, who are better than you, they'll come and they'll compete with you. So the internal competitiveness is strong. That's how it is. And then another issue is how to handle it and how to coexist with that competitiveness, but it's definitely there. It's just normal, I repeat, not just here, in all the big academies of the big clubs.
Sure. Because just getting to La Masia it's an incredible achievement. But then comes the other part, which is staying and fighting for the first team and being able to be seen. And that's why that constant and strong competition, which is always present, creates real competitive peace, like we see in Gavi, for example, who truly embodies what it means to be a competitive beast.
That's why I was telling you the importance of not being able to totally separate it. No, it's not that you can't compete. It's that competition is something intrinsic to football and these big academies because it's there, because people can come from outside and you know it. Every year, you must strive to improve, to grasp concepts, and to grow as a player and as a person. So the competition is what it is. First, getting in. We were talking about it earlier, right? What coaches look for when they scout a player. When you manage to get into one of these top academies, we mentioned La Masia, but it's the same for any top academy, that's already a major hurdle. But once you're in, the selection process and the competition don't just stay there, they actually intensify.
That's right.
The demands keep growing because the ultimate goal is always to turn professional and make it to the first team, right?
Right, yeah.
And it's like a funnel that keeps narrowing, that keeps being done, which is becoming difficult. And therefore, that's why I say that without being the ultimate goal, but the act of competing and competitiveness, in my view, is present and must be present. And you have to teach how to live with it.
Of course. And now I want to know what mindset is built at La Masia for players from a young age. Like, what is this mindset that they all have in common?
Well, we've spoken many times about the importance of the mental aspect, right? Besides the footballing side, which I repeat, we'll get into later if you want, but from a mental standpoint, it's essential. It's very important. Sometimes we've said it many times, right? Players who perhaps with the same talent or even more talent, well, they don't quite, and another who initially isn't assumed to have as much talent as much, but maybe mentally they're able to handle this self-demand. They're able to live with that competitiveness that comes with new players arriving. They grasp the concepts, mentally in the face of difficulties, injuries, moments of poor form. They know how to act, how to respond, how to overcome it. And that player who is mentally strong, is often the one who makes it. It's a difficult path. It's not easy. Otherwise, anyone could do it. And there too, La Masia, it's very important to help, right? Helping from a standpoint of, the player who suffers, because the pressure gets to them sometimes, because they have personal problems, because in the end, these are,
of course,
they're children in a formative stage, and you have to help them and accompany them through this whole process, right? But without any shadow of a doubt, I think the mental aspect has always been important, but I think more and more it has an absolute importance, a relevance, right?
Of course. And would you say that La Masia prioritizes football education over results, especially in the formative stage as well?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well.
Going back to what we said before, right? Can we isolate the results? No, results must be understood as a result of having worked well on the footballing aspect. Results are a consequence. It's not the absolute priority, or it shouldn't be, I think, in the formative stage anywhere. Results come as a consequence of having worked well. In this case, the footballing aspect of having selected the players well, for 1,000 reasons, right? But results must be kept in mind without being the ultimate goal, but rather kept in mind as a consequence of having done everything else well, right?
Of course. And how does this affect a player's development in the long term?
Well, many circumstances arise going back to this results thing, right? Sometimes, of course, it's just that it's hard to explain, right? Sometimes one in a formative stage can opt for short-term performance, right? I repeat, in football, everything is good and everything can be done and everyone does what they think is best, right? But it's true that sometimes in certain places they prioritize, for example, in the training stages when they're young, the physical aspect, right? There's a big difference sometimes from a physical standpoint, so short-term results are achieved, right? And instead quality or talent is overlooked, right? Which for me is fundamental, Sometimes we have always prioritized talent and quality over the physical, right? And sometimes what does that do? That in the short term you have to be patient, it doesn't yield results, but it doesn't matter if you really believe that player has talent and potential to grow. And that's happened with many players. The most well-known case that everyone knows is the case of Firmino, right? Who suffered because his physique didn't help him because of whatever. But the club was patient, we knew how to wait, we saw the talent he had, and when he physically matured, he became the player that everyone knows today, right? But results are important, but I repeat, they are a consequence of having done the training work well. Sure, and with certain players who don't have immediate results, but when you glimpse that they might have talent, that they have quality, that they can progress, that they want to learn, that they are mentally strong. You have to be patient and wait for that evolution to come. Sometimes it happens and other times it doesn't. But I think the club has an obligation when faced with talent to be patient.
Sure, and then we see that if at some point they leave La Masia, they can also find opportunities in other. They already have that foundation of training that they can already adapt to any team, right? Really, I mean, they can transfer what they've learned and everything. It's just so many concepts, both football-wise, the mentality, the professionalism, everything it teaches you that afterwards you can go anywhere and adapt well.
Naturally, because it's what we were discussing before, right? I mean, reaching the first team, establishing yourself in the first team is difficult. Sure, no, otherwise it wouldn't be difficult. So there are many high-level players who, due to circumstances, for whatever reason, well, they don't end up establishing themselves in the first team. These players have a place in any team in the world. In fact, if you look around the world at the number of players who are playing, who come in this case from La Masia, well, there are so many, right? But this is based on the fact that they have assimilated very well the football concepts we've always talked about, right? That make up that football intelligence we mentioned, that mental speed, they've internalized it, and that allows them to have a very good level to play anywhere, right? Sometimes due to circumstances, players who haven't managed to make it here have then succeeded greatly in other teams, right? In fact, the Spanish national team is full of players who aren't at Barca right now, but who come from the. Therefore, we build sometimes making it or not depends on many circumstances. What is really important is to fully grasp the concepts. Understanding the game well, those things we always talk about, for me is the foundation. Then in any team, in any system, with any footballing idea, being able to develop and grow and reach a top level within professional football, right?
And what happens in the case of so many talented players who don't receive this football education, which we also see in the case of many who have a lot of talent, but, well, these concepts of body positioning or these footballing concepts, they've never learned them.
Well, I repeat, because that's very important, right? Everyone interprets football in a different way, and they're all valid, eh? I think that's the beauty of football, right? Everyone can understand it and give importance to one thing or another, right? For me, that players, especially, I repeat, in the formative stage, acquire that series of concepts that allow them to understand the game, have mental speed, etc., to me seems essential. There may be another way of understanding the game that perhaps doesn't prioritize this, prioritizes other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this sense, well, look, and there will be players, of course, who will have achieved very high levels, perhaps without having fully grasped this, right? To me, it seems that it's an idea of understanding the game that seems basic for any elite level player, and that I believe guarantees you access to the elite later on, right? I really think that in one way or another, with more or less awareness sometimes that they have it, but I think all the great players, I repeat, sometimes with awareness or without awareness of it, but they have assimilated many concepts that we try here with the La Masia methodology, and that's another very important thing from the very earliest ages until the end, to transmit them, to work on them so that they assimilate them.
Sure, because, well, we also see, I've also come across very talented players who know how to play very well, that you find, well, in the United States, for example, in Miami, you see players.
Sure.
Well, they know how to touch it very well. They have a very good dribble. But it was just that, I mean, I see these concepts of distances and everything. No, I mean, it was fun. Taking the ball, doing many tricks, a real talent. But in the end, without this education, that fully develops a player.
Sure, because what you've said, Nico, seems very important to me, right? But one thing is playing with the ball, being skillful, having a lot of skill with the ball, doing fantastic, wonderful things, right? And the other is playing football. The other is understanding the game, understanding football. And that seems very important to me. One thing, I repeat, is playing with friends, being skillful, dribbling, playing, going wherever you want and so on, and moving and come on, and I don't let go of the ball and so on, and boom. It's playing with the ball, and look, this is great fun, and it's very good. The other is playing football. The other is understanding the game. The other is, sometimes people confuse playing football well with, I don't know, with skill or with, those are different concepts. And as I understand it, for me, playing football well is when the simpler and the faster you do things, the better. And the faster you execute, the better. And that is playing football. When understanding the game is essential, and here you were talking, for example, about the issue of distances, the issue of being able to always observe, to always be well positioned for the next play, locating spaces. I don't know. Before that, the issue of being able to identify passing lines of many concepts that have to do with the game that has to be already playing football.
That's it. Yes, yes.
So assimilating all these concepts, all these ideas from, I repeat, the key is from a very young age throughout the training stage. So they identify this, so they're mentally quick, so they think fast. I mentioned that execution speed earlier. That seems essential to me. And it's what makes the difference between a player or a kid playing in the street who's very agile, who does things with the ball, which is great. He's skillful, but maybe he doesn't read the game, right?
Sure.
It's different. It's simple to understand. It's not easy to do. You have to work at it. Everything requires effort, but I think this is sort of what makes the difference, and what ultimately allows a player to reach the elite level. What we've always said, right? They have to have talent, of course. They have to understand. They have to be skillful, technically good, physically good, of course. But besides, aside from all this, which in a way is a given when you're in an elite environment, but you also have to understand the game and assimilate a series of concepts that will make you improve a lot, I believe, as a player.
Sure. No, totally.
And without forgetting, it might seem like a truism, but a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of sacrifice. It's not easy. If it were easy, anyone would do it, right? If you like the topics we've covered, if you want to keep diving deeper into them, if you want to keep improving as a player, click the link in the description for Best Version 1.
So much demand. An academy like La Masia, where if you're not already doing all this, taking care of your nutrition, taking care of your physical conditioning, these concepts, I mean, everything is related to. And also, do you think a player who gets to La Masia, because normally we see players, the process would be more or less like players with talent in other teams. It could be from neighborhood teams from, it's like a ladder they climb, right? From this team, in my case too, for example, it was going from teams of arriving here in Spain and going to different neighborhood teams, right? There are many teams. There's a high level, especially in Catalonia. Well, in all of Europe too, but in Catalonia, more than what I've seen, there's a ton of talent. I've also played in the Madrid leagues, but in Catalonia, there's like a huge level and talent in every team you go to. There will be players with a lot of talent, and all these players are competing in the end to keep moving up in level. And well, my process was gradually moving up through teams, moving from team to team. There are new experiences too. It's very fun too. The whole process of moving through teams, you meet people. In my case, I was new to Spain. It was a different culture, and I learned, wow, so much. And I'm also quite grateful for that. But there's so much talent in so many teams, and when they get to La Masia, it's also an adaptation process, right? Also, maybe they haven't been taught, as I said before, they have talent. They know how to play the ball, but maybe these concepts at La Masia aren't taught to them in other teams. And that's why this thing about playing fast, maybe they want to keep the ball and they have talent and want to show off, but maybe the best thing would be to play fast. So it's also an adaptation process to learn and play at the rhythm of La Masia.
Yes, several things, I think. First, I totally agree. The level in Europe, in Spain, and specifically because we are from here, the area here in Catalonia, the level in all teams is very high. Honestly, people work very well with a lot of method, a lot of ideas, and that means that in the end, in this case, Barca, the big teams, when they go to select players, you already select players. What I told you before, everyone when they come here has talent, everyone technically is good, everyone has the right conditions, right? That's how it is. So what it's about is that this starts to emerge and that they improve this, right? I repeat, everyone works very well here. When they get here to La Masia, well, I think it's a link. It's one more step of demand and work that makes you improve. So in the end, you have to work. Here we always talk about concepts and such. Let's not overlook. Here, obviously, work is done. Depending, obviously, on each training stage, physical work is done, of course. Tactical work is done. At each training level, what corresponds, of course. Everything that influences a player's training is worked on, most definitely. Of course it is. Do they have talent? Of course. They have to have talent, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Now, having said that, all those players who have those characteristics have to be worked on. So here at La Masia, what I'm telling you is demanded a lot to that assimilation of a series of concepts that basically through methodological work that starts from when they are very small until the end of the training cycle, even the first team, because the idea is the same. But basically, I think what marks, and very briefly, what makes the difference is mental speed. Mental speed, which is nothing other than thinking very fast. Thinking very fast. I'm not talking about physical speed, which is important, of course, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mental speed, that is being able to execute all technical actions as quickly as possible, doing everything fast. If I can play one touch, I play one touch. If I can move as fast as possible to create the passing line, better. If I position myself, fantastic, to be able to execute the action. Instead of getting closer, maybe sometimes supporting means not always getting closer, sometimes moving away. All these ideas, all this understanding of the game, that gives you that mental speed in the end. I think that's what makes the difference, right? It's what you start working on from a very young age. And then at the end of the process, you get these players that everyone knows now and says, damn, they play so fast. They got out of the pressure so well with one touch, so easy. Yes, so easy. But behind that, there is
a lot of work in understanding.
A lot of work in understanding the game, thinking fast, being able to execute, always being well positioned. Oh, how well he received it between the lines. Yes, but it's not a coincidence. First, you have to identify the passing lane. You have to position yourself in such a way that you can beat it and be well oriented. Sometimes a meter in front or a meter behind makes all the difference in a play.
Yeah.
So identifying those concepts, identifying where the space is, how to position myself to beat opponents from when you have the ball, for example, sometimes, right? Everyone says Kubarsi, oh, how well he breaks the passing lines. Well, at the beginning, he didn't break them.
Right.
But all of this is work. So you have to identify the passing lanes. You have to be able to play to the third man, to play facing forward, to break lines. It's a series of concepts we talk about that I repeat from a very young age. From right now, they start working on, and they become internalized. And you take it as normal, right? So the difference for me is everyone has talent. Everywhere there are many people with talent and many capabilities. And they surely work on these kinds of things too. But I think that at the level required here, at the level we do it here, it's probably what gives you sets you apart a bit from players from other places. And that, I repeat, makes it so that many times, right? When you see players from teams out there, or even commentators or journalists on TV, this kid, you can tell they're training at La Masia because look how he positions himself, look at the passing lane, look at the profile, whatever. Well, I think that's what makes a bit of a difference. And what's most important from an internal club point of view, when a player reaches the first team, they practically don't need to adapt to the idea of the game.
Done.
They have very well assimilated what needs to be done, and that's a huge advantage for the club and for the player.
Sure, the only difference is the speed at which they execute.
Exactly.
I mean, they already have the concepts, but they do it at
very fast because they think ahead. And that we're talking in this case about La Masia, about Barcelona, but any great team, any great player, you see that, I don't know, you see Mbappe, no, it's just, oh, what a goal, how fast he executed. Well, yes, but it's not a coincidence, eh? First, he's very fast in himself, but then he positions himself perfectly, always well-oriented, identifies the spaces. Technically, he thinks very fast, otherwise it's impossible. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Pause.
Bellingham. No, how good. He's great between the lines. He moves between them and is always well positioned. He always receives well, or he arrives so well. Well, he's identified the timing, the perfect moment to enter. It's just, I don't know. And so many other players. You see City play. Sure. Pep's City, well, you say, wow, how they look for superiorities. No, it's just so good. They play to the third man. How fast they touch. Yeah, but it's no coincidence. Behind it, there's a whole lot of work, a whole idea that always has a lot to do with the concept we always talk about. I want to be repetitive because I think it's important, which is mental speed.
Sure.
Being able to think and execute faster than the others. And this makes the difference.
No, absolutely. In my case too. Look, it's honestly never too late to learn these important concepts because, look, even now with my current team, I'm still learning and now I'm thinking more about actually applying these concepts, and I'm already seeing some really big improvements in my personal game compared to just a few years ago.
Sure.
I mean, it's something that continues. We're always improving that mental speed, all these concepts, and it doesn't stop. I mean, it's never too late to keep learning it.
And then there are very good players, very good ones, who do it unconsciously sometimes. Because they have it, they do it, they position themselves well. But like all things, if they explain it to you, they explain it to you, the why, they explain what it means for you, where to do it, how to do it. Well, imagine the one who already has that enormous quality on top of it. There are extraordinary players who almost have it built in, who do things that no one has taught them. But if on top of that you explain it, you explain why you do it, why it benefits you sometimes not to get closer, but to move away, to gain that meter I was talking about before, that meter of getting closer or moving away makes the difference.
Sure.
If you understand that and they explain it to you and the player realizes it, I think they take a qualitative leap. A very big one. And all of that has to do with and is achieved through methodological work with a series of ways of working.
Sure. And now, how did you bring this philosophy to Best Version 1?
Well, I think in the end, it's an idea of football that from a very young age, I was lucky enough to they explained it to me, they passed it on. I was lucky enough to be with Johan Cruyff, with Charlie Rexach, who is a master in everything, a master of all this. Then I joined Barcelona during that whole formative stage. I had coaches again like Charlie Rexach, Johan Cruyff, with many players who... There are many top-level coaches who explain the why of things to me. You say, wow, well, it's true. Well, if instead of going here and getting closer, if I move away, then maybe I have more time, maybe I can execute. Maybe when I get here, if instead of stopping it, thinking and playing, I think beforehand and play with one touch, in the elite, my game improves. So, through the years in youth football at La Masia, I was internalizing, I was learning, studying all these concepts, this whole footballing idea. Then I was lucky enough to work as a coach with Pep, who was another one, with Tito Villanova, with all these coaches who had all this very well internalized. And you start realizing the importance of this whole idea and how much you all improve, each at your own level, how much the players improve. Then Barcelona already with this idea. Then I had the fortune of being able to direct La Masia for 7 years and continue on top of it to keep applying and understanding those concepts and above all, explaining and conveying very well the why of things. Why do we do it? Why do they do it? And it works. In the end, you see that the players evolve a lot, that they have a very high level. And in the end, I repeat, when you're lucky enough to have helped develop players like Lamine, Balde, Fermin, etc., you see it and say, wow, it's a source of pride.
Sure.
Well, you might like it more, you might like it less, but this works, the method works, and the qualitative leap they can make is very important, right? And over the years, after studying it, seeing it, having assimilated it yourself, having had it explained to you by, well, coaches like Cruyff, like Pep, like so-and-so, you realize that it's a whole theory that you might like more, you might like less, but it improves the player a lot, and it works.
Sure. No, that has actually been proven.
And so I decided, well, that thing that sometimes seems like a mystery, I thought it was fantastic to be able to convey it, to be able to teach it, and for people to be able to, in a way, benefit a bit from all this football theory, which I repeat, okay? In football, there are 1,000 ways to understand and interpret it. I've grown up with this, I'm very clear about it, I know it works. And that's why I thought it was interesting to be able to help everyone and convey this idea, right?
Sure. And I wanted to ask, why did you decide to build Best Version 1 instead of another, joining another technical or motivational platform, of which there are also thousands out there? I mean...
No, because it's what I'm telling you, right? Sometimes we talk about this and then the people shouldn't be mistaken. Working technically is very important. Doing 50 repetitive exercises of striking with whatever, that's all well and good. When working physically from certain ages, doing such and such an integral resistance exercise with whatever, working physically, very important, basic. Nutrition, everything that surrounds the player is basic. But that, let's say it's very common, right? Everyone can do that, right? There are what I was trying or I'm trying to convey is taking this for granted, that it has to be done, it has to be worked on, and it's very important. But all this has to be put at the service of understanding the game. And there are a series of concepts, a series of ideas, a series of footballing behaviors that make the difference from my point of view. And it's all that physical work, all that has to be put at the service of that, of being able to think fast, to act fast. And that's what I really believe gives you the qualitative leap. And that makes the difference between a player or an elite player. I've also been lucky enough to be able to train the best players in the world. Well, Leo, Iniesta, Xavi, Neymar, being with them. And you realize that
Totally.
With these premises, to this enormous talent they have, if you add this, well, I think they are players of
Another level. Totally another level. And what changes in a player when they learn or are taught the game the way they teach it at La Masia?
Well, I think it basically gives them the ability to, the fact of understanding the game, knowing why they do it, allows you to have the option to play at the elite level. The difference between playing in the first division, playing a Champions League match, or a regular match in another category is really the speed at this level.
Yeah.
You have to think very fast. If at the elite level the ball reaches you and you stop, the opponent, who is also top tier elite, gets ahead of you. You're late, you're always late. So you have to think very fast and you have to think ahead. And the faster you think, the faster you execute, the higher your level is, right? And so that's why I think that assimilating this, knowing how to position yourself, knowing how to always be well positioned, gives you a very important qualitative advantage over your opponents who are also at a very high level. So I think it's trying to make a difference that allows you to be in the elite or not.
Sure, it's the differentiating factor, right?
Yes, and you have to start working on that. No, I mean, it's not like saying, today I'm going to do this and that's it. Well, there's work behind this, there's effort, you have to integrate it mentally into your way of playing, right?
Sure, no, totally.
And I repeat, without ignoring, without losing sight of the importance of physical work, of course, tactical work, nutrition, taking care of yourself, living like a true professional, that of course we already take for granted, right?
That all of this is inside Best Version 1 as well.
Of course, because this cannot be ignored, this is very important. Now, I think that if to all this work you add this understanding of the game, this knowing how to think fast, execute fast, see the play before the others, that gives you a qualitative leap. Very important, right?
Totally. And what should they look for? Now a bit more for the parents. What should a parent look for in a football development program, for example?
Well, I think what I was telling you before, right? We have tried here to transmit above all these ideas, these concepts that are supported by images with explanations, with everything you want, so that they understand these concepts, right? Then this isn't magic, then you have to work, you have to train it, but I think it's already very important to open the range a bit, and for them to realize that, wow, there are a series of things besides the importance of striking with the inside, the instep, using technical work, which is very important, but this is out there. They can get this in 1,000 places, working physically, which is also basic, and we also have it, we also explain it, but there are many options, right? What I do find important, I repeat, is to assimilate this series of ideas, this series of concepts, that quick thinking, that mental speed, that understanding of the game, which I believe is what really makes the difference and will give them that qualitative change.
Sure, and how do they know if their child is receiving real football education or if it's just motivation? Because we also see many programs that, I think that over time it will become clear, right?
Sure, it's hard because I'm going back to what I said before. There are 1,000 ways to understand football. Everyone will do or explain what they think is appropriate. I think the big advantage we have, or what we explain, might seem harder or more attractive to some, but what I think is certain, and no one can doubt, is that this works. This works because the number of players we've developed over these years who are at the very top level, I think that's indisputable. So I think what's really important here is that they realize their child is genuinely improving and that they basically understand things as well as the reasons behind them, the why. Many times things are talked about, but people often do not actually explain the why to you. Well, I have to move up here. Well, and why? And why do I have to move up here? There's a whole theory. So I think explaining these concepts, detailing, showing exactly how your player improves on the issue of distances. When you explain, I'm going to support a teammate, no, don't get close, move away, but why? Explaining the why, instead of getting closer, I move away or sometimes not. Instead of moving away, knowing at every moment why I think it's very important the player understands this and assimilates this. For example, it's one of the concepts.
Yes. Why now, especially more than ever, is this way of thinking about the game important? Now, more than ever, that we also see many talented players and this differential factor, why do you think it's important now?
Well, because football is becoming more and more demanding. We go back to the same thing because everything is moving faster. Everyone is becoming better prepared, right? Everyone works physically, and so on, of course. The level is extremely high. So I think that assimilating this, going back to the same thing, thinking fast, executing fast, executing well obviously has to do with your technical condition. That's why, obviously, technically, it's very important. But if you're very good technically, but you don't think fast, it's difficult.
So
If you're good technically and you're at that age, but also you have the habit of thinking fast, of always being well positioned, always well oriented to perform the action, that gives you a qualitative leap in a football as demanding as it is now. I think that for me is fundamental.
no, it's really something truly incredible that I would have loved.
It's fundamental.
I've said this in some episode, but when I was in the United States, it's something I would have loved to know, because knowing this makes you stand out from the rest. Yes.
Because, like all things, I repeat, some have it innately and don't realize it, but like all things, they have to be explained to you. And they explain and tell you, and you say, man, well, if things are explained to you, you realize the importance it has.
And then
It all aligns. It must be done with a specific methodological approach, which is what we're also trying to explain. But things have to be explained to you, like everything in life. And when they're explained and shown to you, you say, wow. It opens your eyes. It opens up like a fan. So it's like I said, some will like it more, some will like it less, because football is so wonderful, and that's the beauty of it. Everyone interprets it as they see fit. What can't be questioned is that this, for example, this works, and over the years and right now, with so many very young players at a very high level, both with, thank you, their clubs and the national team, I think this is beyond any doubt, right? Then you have to interpret it. You have to work. You have to put in the effort. This isn't, as I said before, this isn't just, well, I'll do this now and tomorrow it's done. This is a training process. It's work that has to be integrated, practiced, and assimilated. And
over time, you'll see the results.
Everyone at their own level, for sure.
Totally. Well, Jordi, that's all for today. Thanks again for
another
episode. A pleasure. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Hey, thanks for being here. If you want to keep spending time with us and getting valuable information, subscribe to the channel. And if there's any topic you would like us to cover, leave it in the comments below. See you in the next episode.